Hello and welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Carrie Oderman with UATV. Today we are talking about a report on how Russia pursues hybrid war to destabilize Ukraine. It is the first major study of the Surkov leaks, 3 tranches of hacked emails belonging to top Putin advisor Vladislav Surkov and figures around him, which were obtained by Ukrainian cyber activists in 2016 and 17. The report demonstrates how the Kremlin is reinventing Soviet-era tactics to exert power and destabilize neighboring countries, and it provides a detailed insider's view of Russia's strategy and tactics for destabilizing Ukraine. Joining us in the studio today to expand on this topic is Alya Shandra, editor-in-chief of Euromaidan Press and one of the authors of the report. Thank you so much for being here. Before I ask the first question, we've got some footage we'd like to show.
Russia's hybrid war. It's not the war we know from the past. But what is it exactly? The hacked emails of Putin's top advisor, Vladislav Surkov, and his assistant Inal Ardzimba give us some clues. The goal is the same: force another state to do your will, but by cunning, not brute force. Change your opponent's view of the world, and he will make self-defeating decisions all by himself. This is a Soviet technique called reflexive control. And for Russia, Ukraine's defeat is refusing the EU and NATO course and falling back into Russia's sphere of influence. The Surkov leaks show how Russia tried to trick Ukraine into exactly that.
Looks like Russia is using the same tactics, but they've updated them a little bit to modern times using emails, cyber, hybrid warfare. Let's talk a little bit about this.
Well, indeed, many researchers of Russian hybrid war have noted that basically it's an updated version of the Soviet time tactic of active measures. But what is interesting, and yes, a modified version of these active measures is being used in Ukraine and countries of the West, but to different extents, because Russia can penetrate Ukraine much more easier than the countries of the West. Its arsenal of tactics is much larger. So whereas in the West we have seen a lot of attention to disinformation and propaganda, which is, of course, a major component of Russia's hybrid war. Here in Ukraine, it has endlessly more opportunities. And the Surkov leaks are valuable because they give us an insider's look and give us evidence-based proof of what Russia is doing.
How do we know the leaks were authentic?
Well, first of all, we need to look at the volume of the leaks. It's impossible to make up so many emails. It's impossible to make up so many photo and video reports that you cannot find anywhere else. The sheer bulk of the emails, they lend credibility to this hack being authentic because there is so much analytical work from different analytical centers. But second, we can also look at the headers, the digital headers of the emails, which also, according to specialists, appear to be authentic.
Because of the bulk of them, and they were from 2016 to 2017.
No, the hacks were in 2016-17, but the leaks unfortunately ended 2015. So we only have this brief snapshot of what was happening in 2014 and 15.
You said it was a brief snapshot. How much data are we talking about?
It's around 4,000 emails.
And how were you able to go through these emails? What was the process for the report?
Well, I uploaded them in the program and read through them all, one by one.
It shows a fascinating amount of dedication to. What is one of the emails that sticks out most in your mind?
For me, it's difficult to select them because what was most striking to me is the sheer amount of effort that the Kremlin is putting into analyzing Ukraine. It was this sheer bulk of analytical briefs, studying meticulously every nook and cranny of our political landscape, all the possibilities to intervene in our affairs that struck me the most. But if I was to speak of the most valuable emails for Ukraine's position maybe on the international scene, it would be probably those proving Russian intervention in the Donetsk People's Republic and proving how the Kremlin played a crucial role in setting up this puppet republic. These emails are actually in this report is being used as proof of Russia's control over the republics in international processes and also in political discussions. So I would say that this is probably the most important outcome, evidence-based proof of Russia's control over the republics, because although this, for many analysts, this is an open secret, still there are voices that say, oh, where's your proof? Well, the proof is now here, and this is, I think, a very good outcome of this report. But there are many, many striking examples that that are there. Well, one that comes to mind particularly is the way that the Kremlin disseminated its propaganda messages after MH17 was shut down. It's only one email, but it gives very valuable insight in how the Kremlin works. There was a set of topics that the Kremlin set out to a network of political influencers, and these influencers, they were divided into categories. So it's this shows that the Kremlin kept track of their progress and how influential they were, and maybe some were fired and maybe others were recruited. And these influencers, they all inserted these messages where they could. So for instance, Russian diplomats, they got it into some Western media outlets. And then some influencers in Ukraine, they got it into some blog. And some political influencers, they just stated it in some interview. So, and by doing this, by a sort of carpet bombing of these messages from all sides, the Kremlin was able to form this alternative reality, basically, where a conspiracy theory that Ukraine shot down MH17 because it was a Franz Ferdinand moment, like the start of World War I. This message was just there was artillery fire of this message from all sides, and of course this creates an illusion of reality, that it's a legitimate message to have. That was one of the revealing emails for me also. But another revealing email, of course, was the way that Russia searched for narratives that could act as Trojan horses to advance its goals in Ukraine. For instance, for one of the avenues it pursued was a soft federalization of Ukraine, that is to urge Ukrainian regions to demand more autonomy from the central government for themselves.
So they could more easily be...
So, of course, the Kremlin could more easily influence Ukrainian political affairs. For instance, if these regions were given veto power over decisions such as entering NATO, then of course the Kremlin would have endless opportunities to intervene in Ukraine's course. Can
I interrupt you for a minute? There's a lot of decentralization going on right now. Does that cause any red flags when put next to your report?
You know, actually it does, because decentralization, on the one hand, it gives opportunities for regions to use resources more efficiently. And on the other hand, in the state of war that Ukraine is de facto in right now, it gives the Kremlin also opportunities to intervene. So whereas if Ukraine was not a war, decentralization would be obviously a very positive process. Here, it must be done very carefully, and separatist tendencies must be monitored very carefully.
Have you made recommendations to the Zelensky administration based on the findings of your report?
Well, we have tried to contact state agencies to discuss this report with them, and we have not received... They came to the presentation, but we have not been able to discuss this with them in detail.
Now, you've done a lot of in-depth research. Adding more credence to your research is that you paired up with the Royal Institute, the Royal United Service Institute, and a British MP. How did this cooperation look?
Well, Robert Seeley is a British MP that is also a researcher of Russian hybrid war. He worked as a journalist in Ukraine, and he also served in the military, so he has an understanding of how these military techniques work. And he's writing a PhD about Russian hybrid war, and basically I gave an interview to him while he was here in Kiev, and from that our cooperation started from there. And the result is this report that was published in this British Institute, which is the world's, they say they're the world's oldest independent think tank. Yes. Basically, I think it was a very fruitful cooperation, because Robert helped frame all of these processes that are going on in Ukraine in the global context and compare them to the big picture of Russia's hybrid war in different countries, which I think is very valuable for giving this situation in Ukraine an international appeal. So basically, but returning to how the Kremlin used Trojan horse narratives, it's interesting that this campaign to federalize Ukraine, it was cloaked under very benevolent issues, such as, for instance, giving the Zaporizhia Oblast, which has ecological problems, more power to solve those ecological problems. Isn't that what everybody would want? Of course. We want to solve our ecological problems. So, of course, under this narrative, the Kremlin was able to gather a lot of public traction, a lot of signatures in support for a special status for this Zaporizhia region. And so it acted in all the regions and found these narratives that could act as Trojan horses to advance its goals. And that is one of the basics of reflexive control.
And how were they inserting these narratives? Was it social media? It was completely media-based, but was it more weighted to social media?
Well, it's not actually. Returning to our first question is, in the West, the Kremlin uses media and disinformation. Here, it uses front groups, it uses politicians, it uses social movements, it uses a lot of more. It has a lot more weapons at its hands. So basically, whereas in the West it fabricates virtual reality in the media sphere, here it creates virtual reality on the ground. So these movements, they were created on the ground, basically. They were bribed politicians that made coalitions in support of the constitutional process, it was called. And it was activist groups that supported these politicians. There were conferences that were made. There were activist groups standing with posters and making rallies. There were signature gathering, and these collected signatures, quite many of them, they were delivered to the Verkhovna Rada. So you see, it goes much more than simple disinformation and fakes. It's a virtual reality on the ground.
Now, their reflexive control was also mentioned in the video. Did some of the people that participated in the propaganda, were they aware of it or were they being manipulated?
Well, I would divide the Ukrainian collaborators of the Kremlin into two categories. One simply wanted to make money. They were being paid and then they created all this sort of virtual activity. I think they understood that they were working for Kremlin interests, but maybe they did not care. And the other one is ideological collaborators. They're the ones that willingly promoted the idea of the Russian world and willingly helped Russia intervene in Ukrainian affairs. And I think these are the most dangerous collaborators of the two because, of course, they wanted to achieve Russia's goals in Ukraine.
Are they easy to differentiate?
Yes, of course, because in Surkov's emails, the ideological collaborators are the ones that are generating the ideas. Mm-hmm. They're the ones organizing the process. And then there are just the foot soldiers. So we have the officers of the Russian war, and we have just the foot soldiers that just go and implement orders and get paid for it. So, of course, I would say that these first collaborators is what the Ukrainian government and security services should pay very close attention to. Because we see that, for instance, that Odessa activist Anton Davichenko, he was arrested after the anti-Maidan rallies in 2014 because he called for disintegration of Ukraine. And he was arrested, but he was let out on house arrest and he escaped to Russia. And from that moment on, we see all these plans that he implements together with Surkov's office. We see all the damage that he causes, and we see his unique value because he knows Ukraine from the inside. He has all these contacts on the ground.
And he offers that knowledge.
Yes, and he offers this knowledge to basically to destroy Ukraine, to destroy our statehood. So I cannot stress enough the importance of paying attention to these local collaborators and their actions. And I see that, unfortunately, Ukrainian government is not paying enough attention to this, because Alya Shandra, one of the most important collaborators in Surkov's emails, the Kharkiv communist leader that got her election campaign in 2015 financed fully by the Kremlin, she perhaps will be let out of prison without serving a term. She was caught on a bribe that she was giving to also as part of the project to federalize Ukraine, to push for more autonomy for Kharkiv region. She was captured on a bribe, but now she is also she is not staying in the remand prison while the process is ongoing. Basically, she only has a night house arrest, and she is free to move around as she wants. And it's all pointing to a possible scenario that she will be released without serving any time at all. And I think I would like to stress that it's extremely important to identify local collaborators and do something about them.
Well, your research is certainly carrying a lot of responsibility with it. I appreciate you being here. I have to say, it sounds more like a spy novel than academic research. It's fascinating. Where can people access this? We spoke informally about it, but how does someone read up more on this?
Well, you just need to Google the Surkov leaks, inner workings of Russia's hybrid war. It's online on the site of the Rusi Institute. We also released a Ukrainian translation. Which is called the Surkov leaks also. Внутрішня кухня російської гібридної війни. You can find these, we have a short link, bit.ly Surkov leaks and Surkov leaks UA. So it's all online.
Thank you very much for joining us. That was Alya Shandra, Editor-in-Chief of Euromaidan Press. Stay tuned for more with UATV.